The snow had not stopped falling for 19 days high in the frozen peaks of the Baekdu Mountains, where the air was so thin that most creatures could not survive. Two dragons lay chained to the frozen ground. Their scales, once bright as polished jade, had turned dull and gray. Their eyes, which should have burned like twin suns, were dim and tired. The older one was called Virith. Her younger brother was Keller. They had been left here to die, and they both knew it. 3 weeks ago, everything had been different. They had belonged to a wealthy merchant named Wang Daesung, a man who traded in things that should never be traded. Stolen goods, forbidden weapons, creatures captured from the wild and sold to the highest bidder. The two dragons had been his most prized possessions. He kept them chained at his secret mining camp, using their fearsome appearance to scare away anyone who came too close. He fed them just enough to keep them alive. He beat them when they disobeyed. He put enchanted collars around their necks that suppressed their fire and made them weak. Then one night soldiers came. Wang Daesung heard them coming and ran. He took his gold, his papers, and his fastest horse. He did not take his dragons. Why would he? They were just tools to him. Broken tools that would only slow him down. The soldiers searched the camp but found nothing of value. They saw the two chained creatures and decided they were too dangerous to release. Someone would come back for them, they reasoned. Someone would handle the problem. But no one ever did. Now Virith watched her brother slowly dying beside her. Keller was younger than her by almost 100 years. In dragon terms, he was still a child. His body needed food and warmth to grow, and he had neither. The frozen scraps of meat they found in the abandoned camp had run out days ago. The enchanted collars around their necks meant they could not breathe fire to warm themselves. All they could do was press their cold bodies together and wait. Virith had stopped eating 5 days ago. Whatever scraps she found, she gave to Keller. He was too weak to argue, too weak to notice. She told herself it did not matter. She was older, stronger. She could survive longer without food. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was buying him days, maybe hours. Nothing more. Tonight was the coldest night yet. The wind screamed across the mountain like a wounded animal. Snow piled against their bodies until they looked like two gray hills rising from the white ground. Keller had stopped shivering, which frightened Virith more than anything. Shivering meant the body was still fighting. When the shivering stopped, it meant the body had given up. She curled her wing over him as best she could. The chains did not give her much room to move. She pressed her head against his and made a low sound in her throat. It was not quite a song. Dragons did not sing, but it was close. It was the sound their mother used to make when they were small, back before the hunters came and everything fell apart. Keller did not respond. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. Virith looked up at the falling snow and felt something she had never felt before. Despair. True, complete despair. Dragons were proud creatures. They did not beg. They did not cry. They faced death with dignity and silence. But in that moment, alone on the frozen mountain with her dying brother, Virith would have begged anyone for help. She would have promised anything, done anything, but there was no one to hear her. Then she saw it. Movement in the white. A shape, dark against the endless snow, moving slowly toward them. Her first thought was wolf. Wolves sometimes came to dying creatures, waiting for the end. But this shape was wrong for a wolf. It walked on 2 legs. It carried something on its back. Virith hissed a warning to Keller, but he did not wake. She raised her head as much as her chains would allow and bared her teeth. Even weak and starving, she was still a dragon. She would not let anything hurt her brother without a fight. The figure kept coming. It moved slowly through snow that reached its waist, pushing forward step by step. As it got closer, Virith could make out more details. A human, male, dressed in thick winter clothes that were worn and patched in many places. He carried a large pack on his back and walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. Humans. Virith knew humans. Humans had captured them. Humans had chained them. Humans had left them here to die. Every human she had ever met had wanted something from her. Her scales, her blood, her fire, her obedience. She growled as the man approached. It was a weak sound, nothing like the roar she could have made before the collar. But it was enough to make him stop. He stood there in the snow, maybe 20 steps away, and looked at them. Virith waited for what always came next. The scream of fear, the scramble to run away, the desperate grabbing for weapons. Humans always did one of these things when they saw dragons. This human did none of them. He simply stood there, snow falling on his shoulders, and studied them with an expression Virith could not read. His face was weathered and lined, the face of someone who had seen difficult years. His eyes were dark and calm. There was no fear in them, no greed, no cruelty. What Virith saw in those eyes made no sense to her. It looked almost like sadness. Slowly, carefully, the man set down his pack. He removed his outer coat and laid it on the snow. Then he started walking toward them again, his hands held out where she could see them. Empty hands. No weapons. No chains. He spoke in a low, steady voice. Virith did not understand the words. She had never learned the human tongue. But she understood tone. She understood intention. This human was not speaking to threaten her. He was speaking to calm her. The way one might speak to a frightened animal. He stopped just outside the reach of her chains and crouched down in the snow. Up close, she could see how thin he was, how tired. This human had his own troubles. He was barely surviving himself. Yet here he was, crouching in a blizzard, looking at two chained dragons with something that looked terribly like concern. When he saw the enchanted collars around their necks, his expression changed. When he saw Callar's visible ribs, the dull patches on his scales, the way his chest barely rose and fell with each breath, something sparked in those dark eyes. Anger. Not at them. At whoever had done this to them. The human stood up. He walked back to his pack, opened it, and began pulling out supplies. A small pot. A fire starter. Wrapped packages of dried meat and rice. He was making camp. Right here. In front of two dragons, Virith watched him with growing confusion. What was this human doing? Why was he staying? He should run. He should save himself. The blizzard would kill him if he stayed out here much longer. But he did not run. He built a small fire in the shelter of a broken wall. He began to cook. And when the smell of hot food drifted across the frozen air, Keller finally stirred. The human looked at them both, then down at his meager supplies. Virith saw him counting, calculating, making a decision. He divided everything into 3 portions. 3. 1 for himself. 1 for each of them. Virith did not understand. She had lived for over 400 years, and she had never seen anything like this. A human, alone and starving, choosing to share his last food with 2 creatures who could offer him nothing in return. What kind of human was this? The man's name was Yun Seo Jin, though the dragons would not learn this until much later. He was 34 years old. He had been a blacksmith's apprentice once in a small village near the southern coast. That was a long time ago, in what felt like another life. Before the war came. Before the soldiers burned everything he knew to the ground. Before he learned that home was just a word, and words could disappear like smoke. For the past 8 years, Seojin had been walking. Not toward anything. Just away. Away from the memories. Away from the places where people knew his name and his story. He worked where he could, fixing broken tools and sharpening dull blades. He stayed nowhere longer than a few weeks. He made no friends. He kept no possessions he could not carry. It was a lonely life, but loneliness was better than loss. You cannot lose what you never have. He had been crossing the Baidu Mountains because it was the fastest route to the eastern provinces. Everyone said the mountain pass was dangerous in winter. Everyone said only a fool would attempt it during blizzard season. But Seojin had stopped caring about danger years ago. What was the worst that could happen? He would die. Death did not frighten him anymore. Then the blizzard hit, worse than anything he had expected. He had wandered for hours, half blind in the white, until he stumbled upon the abandoned mining camp. He had been looking for shelter. He had found something else entirely. Two dragons, chained, starving, left to die like unwanted dogs. Seojin had seen many terrible things in his life. War did that to a person. But something about this sight hit him harder than he expected. Maybe it was the way the bigger one curled protectively over the smaller. Maybe it was the dull desperation in those ancient eyes. Maybe it was simply that he understood what it felt like to be abandoned, to be left behind, to realize that no one was coming to save you. He could have walked away. He probably should have. These were dragons, dangerous creatures, monsters, according to most people. And his supplies were already low, barely enough to get him through the mountains. Helping them would mean risking his own life. Seojin thought about this for exactly 3 seconds. Then he started unpacking his supplies. The first challenge was getting them to eat. When he approached with the food, the bigger dragon snapped at him. Her teeth were as long as his fingers, and even weak as she was, she could have taken his arm off. Seojin did not flinch. He had faced worse than teeth. He simply set the food down within a reach and walked back to his fire. He ate his own portion slowly, making sure they could see him, showing them it was safe. Not poison, not a trick, just food. Simple as that. The small one broke first. He lifted his head, nostrils flaring at the smell of cooked meat, and practically lunged for his share. He ate like he had never eaten before, desperate and messy, making small sounds of relief that were almost painful to hear. How long had these creatures gone without food? How long had they suffered here alone? The bigger one watched her brother eat. Then she looked at Seojin. Something changed in her eyes. The suspicion was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Confusion, maybe, uncertainty. She did not understand him. He could see that clearly. She did not understand why he was helping. That was fine. He did not fully understand it himself. She ate. More slowly than her brother, but she ate. And when she finished, she laid her head back down and watched Seojin with those golden eyes. Not threatening now, just watching. Trying to figure him out. After the meal, Seojin turned his attention to the chains. They were heavy things, thick iron links attached to stone anchors driven deep into the frozen ground. But that was not what worried him. What worried him were the symbols carved into the metal. Enchantments. Magical bindings designed to hold creatures far stronger than iron alone could contain. Seojin was not a magic user. He had never had the gift for it. But he had learned to recognize enchanted metalwork during his years as a blacksmith. His old master had sometimes been hired to repair such items, and he had taught Seojin to identify the signs. The chains on these dragons were sophisticated work, expensive, professional. Whoever had imprisoned them had wanted to make very sure they stayed imprisoned. But underneath all the magic, there were still locks, physical mechanisms of metal and springs. No matter how powerful the enchantment, someone still had to open the chains eventually. That meant keys. And where there were keys, there were locks. And where there were locks, there was a chance. Seojin pulled out his tools. He had a small kit that he carried everywhere, containing picks and wrenches and delicate instruments for fine work. It was not designed for lock-breaking, but he had learned many skills in his years of wandering. You picked up things when you had nothing but time. He approached the bigger dragon slowly. She tensed but did not snap at him this time. Progress. He knelt beside her front leg, where the thickest chain was attached, and examined the lock closely. The enchantment sparked against his skin when he touched it. A small shock like static, warning him away. He ignored it and kept working. The lock was complex. Multiple pins, unusual configuration, resistance at angles he did not expect. Every few seconds, another small shock ran through his fingers. The enchantment did not want him here. It was fighting him. Seo-jin kept working. The night grew colder. The fire burned low. His fingers began to cramp and ache. The shocks from the enchantment grew stronger, leaving small burns on his skin. Any sensible person would have stopped, would have given up, would have accepted that some locks were not meant to be opened. But Seo-jin had stopped being sensible years ago. Sensible people did not walk through mountain blizzards. Sensible people did not share their last food with monsters. Sensible people did not kneel in the snow for hours, hands bleeding, trying to free creatures that could never repay them. The dragon watched him work. She made a low sound deep in her throat. Seo-jin did not know what it meant. Encouragement? Warning? It did not matter. He was not stopping. Somewhere in the darkest part of the night, the first lock clicked open. The chain fell away from the dragon's leg. She lifted it slowly, like she had forgotten she had legs, like she had forgotten what it meant to move. She flexed her claws, extended and retracted them. The wonder in her eyes made Seo-jin's chest tight. He sat back on his heels, exhausted, hands throbbing. 3 more chains to go. The collars, too. He did not know if he could do it. He did not know if his body would hold out long enough, but he had to try. The dragon lowered her head until her face was inches from his. Her breath was cold, not warm like he expected. The collar suppressed her fire. Even her breath had been stolen from her. She made that sound again. And this time, Seo-jin understood it. Thank you. He reached out, slowly, and laid his burned hand against her snout. Her scales were smooth and cool, like river stones. He did not speak. Words felt too small for this moment. But something passed between them anyway. An understanding. A promise. I will free you. Both of you. Or I will die trying. The dragon closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. Seo-jin had not felt needed in 8 years. He had forgotten what it was like. He had forgotten how much it mattered. He picked up his tools and turned to the next lock. By the second night, Seo-jin had freed 2 of the 4 chains. His hands looked like they belonged to someone else. The burns from the enchantment had spread, leaving red welts across his palms and fingers. His knuckles were cracked and bleeding from the cold. Every movement sent pain shooting up his arms. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Not now. The bigger dragon, the one he had started thinking of as the sister, watched him constantly. She had begun making small sounds when he worked, low rumbles that he interpreted as encouragement. When he paused to rest, she would nudge him gently with her snout. Keep going. Do not give up. We are almost there. The smaller one, the brother, was doing slightly better now that he had food in his stomach. He was alert enough to watch Seo-jin work, his young eyes full of curiosity. Dragons were intelligent creatures. Everyone knew that. But Seo-jin had not truly understood it until now. These were not animals. They were people. Different from humans, yes, but people nonetheless. On the morning of the 3rd day, Seo-jin realized he had a problem. His food was gone. He had divided everything between the 3 of them, giving the dragons larger portions because they needed it more. Now there was nothing left. Not a single grain of rice. Not a single strip of dried meat. The blizzard showed no signs of stopping. Even if it did, there was nothing to hunt on this frozen mountain. Nothing lived up here. Seojin sat by his small fire and thought about his options. He could leave. Try to make it down the mountain before his strength gave out. The dragons were half free now. Maybe they could finish the work themselves. Maybe they would survive without him. He looked at the sister's remaining chains. Looked at the collar still locked around her neck. Without his tools, without hands that could work the mechanisms, she would never get free. The enchantments would hold her here until she died. He looked at the brother, still too weak to fly, still dependent on his sister for everything. If she died, he would die too. That was certain. Seojin had spent 8 years running from attachment. 8 years telling himself he did not care about anything or anyone. 8 years pretending he was empty inside. Just a shell going through the motions of living. It'd all been a lie. He cared. He cared about these two creatures more than he had cared about anything in years. The thought of leaving them here, of saving himself while they suffered, made him physically sick. So he made his choice. The only choice he could make and still live with himself. He would stay. He would finish what he started. And whatever happened after that, happened. The third lock was the hardest yet. The enchantment seemed to sense his weakness. The shocks came faster now, stronger. Each one left him gasping, stars exploding behind his eyes. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold his tools. More than once, he dropped his picks and had to search for them in the snow with numb fingers. The sister watched him suffer. He could see the distress in her eyes. She did not want this. She did not want him hurting himself for her. But what choice did either of them have? The chains would not open themselves. Midway through the third day, something unexpected happened. The brother moved. Slowly, painfully, he dragged himself across the snow until he was lying next to Seojin. Then he pressed his body against the human side. At first, Seojin did not understand. The dragon's scales were cold. The collar suppressed all their heat. How could this help? Then he realized. The dragon was blocking the wind. His body, thin as it was, created a shelter. A small pocket of still air where the cold could not bite so deeply. Seojin felt his eyes burn. Not from the cold. From something else entirely. These creatures owed him nothing. He was just a stranger who had stumbled into their tragedy. Yet here was the younger one, barely alive himself, using the last of his strength to protect a human. To help the person who was helping them. Seojin had forgotten what kindness felt like. He had been alone so long. He had forgotten that it existed. He wiped his eyes and got back to work. The third lock opened as the sun set. Or at least, Seojin assumed the sun was setting. He could not see it through the clouds. But the light was fading, and that meant night was coming. Another night in the cold. Another night without food. He was not sure he would survive it. The sister was now free, except for her collar. She could move, could stretch, could spread her wings for the first time in weeks. She did so carefully, testing muscles that had been still for too long. Her wingspan was enormous, wide enough to cast a shadow over the entire camp. Even without her fire, she was magnificent, but she did not try to fly. She did not try to leave. Instead, she moved closer to Seojin and lay down beside him. Her brother did the same on his other side. Together, the two dragons surrounded him with their bodies, creating walls of scale and flesh against the freezing wind. It was not warm. Their bodies had no heat to give, but it was better than nothing. It was everything they had thought. Seojin lay between them, staring up at the dark sky, and felt something crack inside him. All those years of walls he had built. All those years of keeping everyone at distance. All those years of telling himself he was better off alone. none of it mattered anymore. He had found something worth staying for, worth fighting for, worth dying for. If it came to that, the sister's head rested near his shoulder. She made that low sound again, the one that meant thank you. But there was something else in it now. Something deeper. Stay with us. Please, stay with us. Do not leave. Seojin reached out and touched her snout, his burned hand against her cold scales. It should have hurt. It did hurt. But he did not care. I am not going anywhere, he thought. I promise. Tomorrow, he would face the final lock. The collar. The most heavily enchanted piece of all. He did not know if he could open it. He did not know if his body would hold out long enough to try. But he would try anyway, because that was what you did for family. And somewhere in the last 3 days, without noticing it, that was what they had become. The 4th day began with Seojin unable to stand. His body had finally reached its limit. Days without food. Nights in freezing cold. Hours of work that drained everything he had. When he tried to rise that morning, his legs simply refused. They buckled under him like wet cloth, dropping him back into the snow. The sister made a sound of alarm. She pressed her snout against his chest, nudging him. Get up. You have to get up. But Seojin could not obey. He could barely keep his eyes open. So this is how it ends, he thought. Not with violence. Not with drama. Just a tired man lying in the snow, too weak to continue. He had known this might happen. When he chose to stay, when he chose to share his food, he had accepted the possibility. Starvation was a slow death, but it was certain. Without fuel, the body simply stopped working. It was basic truth. He had made his choice knowing the cost. The strange thing was, he did not regret it. He looked at the sister, at the collar still locked around her neck. One more lock. Just one more. If he could open it, she could fly. She could take her brother and escape this frozen mountain. She could live, but his hands would not move. His arms felt like they were made of stone. Everything was heavy. Everything was fading. The sister seemed to understand. She looked at the collar, then at Seojin, and made a sound he had never heard before. It was not a growl or a rumble. It was higher, sharper, almost like a human crying. Dragons did not cry. Everyone knew that. But in that moment, watching her, Seojin was not so sure. The brother crawled closer. He was still weak, still thin, but he had more strength than Seojin now. He pressed against the human's other side, trying to share what little warmth he could. Trying to help the way Saigon had helped him. The 3 of them lay there in the snow. 2 dragons and a dying man. The blizzard howled around them, indifferent to their struggle. The world did not care whether they lived or died. The world never cared, but they cared about each other. And sometimes that was enough. Seojin drifted. He was not quite asleep, not quite awake. Somewhere in between. He saw things in the gray space. His village before the fire. His mother's face, warm and kind. The blacksmith shop where he had spent his youth, learning to shape metal into useful things. He saw the sister and her brother, free and flying, soaring through clear blue skies. They were healthy, strong, happy. The image made him smile. At least someone would survive this. Then the sister did something that changed everything. She pressed her forehead against Seojin's chest, right over his heart. He felt the cold of her scales, the weight of her great head. And then he felt something else. Something that burned, not fire. Something deeper. Something older. Energy flowed from her into him, hot and bright, like liquid sunlight pouring through his veins. His heart, which had been slowing, suddenly pounded hard. His lungs, which had been struggling, suddenly filled with air. Seojin gasped. His eyes flew open. Colors were brighter than before. Sounds were sharper, He could feel every snowflake that touched his skin. What was happening? He looked at the sister. Her eyes were closed, her body trembling. She was giving him something, pouring something vital from herself into him. He could feel it, a transfer of life force, of strength, of years. He tried to pull away. This was wrong. Whatever she was doing, it was costing her. He could not let her sacrifice herself for him. Not after everything, but she did not let him go. She pressed harder, and the flow intensified. Images flooded his mind. Memories that were not his own. He saw the sister as a hatchling, tumbling through clouds with her mother. He saw her first flight, the terror and joy of it. He saw her brother's birth, his tiny wings still wet, his eyes barely open. He saw the hunters coming, the nets, the chains, the long years of captivity. He saw how old she was. Over 400 years of life. Centuries of memories, experiences, knowledge. And he felt how much she was giving up. Years, decades, maybe centuries. All flowing into him. All keeping him alive. The bond snapped into place like a lock, clicking shut. Seojin felt it in his soul. A connection deeper than anything he had ever experienced. He was linked to her now. Part of her. She was part of him. Two beings, joined together across the impossible divide between species. When she finally pulled away, she was visibly weaker. Her scales, which had started regaining some color, were dull again. Her movements were slow. She had given too much, but Sejin was alive. More than alive. He felt stronger than he had in days. Stronger than he had in years. Something had changed inside him. Something fundamental. He sat up. His body obeyed perfectly. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning energy. He looked at his hands. The burns were still there, but they did not hurt anymore. And beneath his skin, very faintly, he could see something glowing. A soft light like embers beneath dragon fire. She had given him dragon fire. The brother made a sound of amazement. He looked at Seijin with new eyes, seeing what his sister had done. Among dragons, this bond was sacred, ancient. It was forbidden to share it with lesser creatures. To do so was considered shameful, degrading Dodd, but the sister did not look ashamed. She looked relieved. She looked at Seonjin, and despite her weakness, there was peace in her eyes. You saved us, her expression seemed to say. Now I have saved you. We are even. Seojin reached out and touched her face. His hand no longer felt cold against her scales. They were the same temperature now. Part of the same whole. He understood what she had done. She had given him years of her life to extend his. She had bound their souls together in a way that could never be undone. She had chosen him, a human stranger, as her bonded companion. Dragons only bonded once in their lifetimes. And she had chosen to spend that bond on him. Seojin felt tears running down his face. Hot tears, warmer than they should have been. The fire in his blood was changing him, making him something new, something neither fully human nor dragon. He had come to this mountain alone. He had expected to die alone. Instead, he had found a family. He got to his feet. His body felt light, strong, ready. The collar gleamed in the gray light, its enchantments pulsing with malevolent energy. One more lock. Just one more. This time, he was not afraid. The collar was different from the chains. Seojin understood this the moment he touched it. The chains had been prisons. The collar was something worse. It was designed not just to hold, but to hurt. Every enchantment carved into its surface was meant to suppress, to weaken, to break. Whoever had made this thing had wanted the dragon wearing it to suffer. The sister flinched when his fingers brushed the metal. Even through the bond, Seojin could feel her discomfort. The collar had been around her neck for years. Years of constant pain, constant suppression. It had become so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore. But it was still there, grinding away at her spirit like sand wearing down stone. Sejin felt anger rise in his chest. Hot, fierce anger that burned with the new fire in his blood. Someone had done this. Some person somewhere had deliberately crafted this instrument of cruelty, had sold it for gold, had walked away knowing exactly how much suffering it would cause. He hoped he never met that person. He was not sure what he would do if he did. Focus, he told himself. Anger would not open this lock. Only patience and skill would do that. He knelt beside the sister and examined the collar closely. The lock mechanism was hidden beneath layers of enchantment, protected by magic that sparked and crackled whenever he came close. But something was different now. The bond had changed him. When he looked at the enchantments, he could see them. Not just the physical symbols carved into the metal, but the actual patterns of power beneath. Lines of force, woven together like threads in cloth. This was what dragon fire gave him. The ability to see magic as dragons saw it. He studied the patterns carefully. They were complex, layered, designed by someone who truly understood their craft. But they were not perfect. No enchantment was perfect. There were always weak points. Places where the threads were thinner. Places where the weave was not quite right. ECO Jin found one. A tiny flaw, barely visible, where two lines of force crossed at an awkward angle. It was like a loose thread in a sweater. If you pulled it just right, the whole thing would unravel. He reached for it. Not with his hands, but with something else. Something new. The fire inside him responded to his will, extending outward like invisible fingers. He touched the flaw in the enchantment, felt its weakness, and pulled. The magical threads snapped. Not all of them, but enough. The enchantment flickered, weakened, and suddenly the lock beneath was exposed. Just metal now. Ordinary metal that his ordinary tools could handle. He worked quickly. The lock was still complex, but he could manage complex. His picks found the pins, applied pressure in the right places, felt for the subtle clicks that meant progress. The sister held perfectly still, barely breathing, afraid to move and disturb his concentration. Minutes passed. The wind howled. Snow piled around them in drifts. Then the lock opened. The collar fell away from the sister's neck, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. For a moment, nothing happened. She just stood there, completely still, as if she did not believe it was real. Then her fire came back. It started as a glow deep in her chest, visible through her scales. It spread outward, racing through her body like sunrise spreading across the sky. Her scales brightened, shifting from dull gray to brilliant jade green. Her eyes blazed with golden light. Heat radiated from her in waves, melting the snow for 10 feet in every direction. She opened her mouth and breathed. The flame that came out was not orange or red. It was blue at the edges, white at the center, hot enough to melt stone. It shot into the sky like a signal beacon, cutting through the gray clouds, parting the blizzard like a curtain being pulled aside. And for the first time in weeks, the sister roared. It was the most beautiful sound Seojin had ever heard. Power and joy and freedom all wrapped together in a single voice. It echoed off the mountain peaks, rolled across the valleys below, announced to the world that something magnificent had been freed. The brother answered her roar with one of his own. Weaker, younger, but just as full of joy. He pressed against his sister's side, soaking in her heat, his own scales starting to regain their color in the warmth of her fire. Seojin stood back and watched them. His hands were burned and bloody. His body ached from days of work. But none of that mattered. This moment, this victory, made everything worth it. The sister turned to look at him. Her eyes, burning with new fire, met his. Through the bond, he felt what she felt. Gratitude beyond words. love beyond measure, a promise that would last as long as they both lived. She lowered her head and pressed her forehead against his chest. Where their bodies touched, warmth flowed between them. Not the harsh heat of her flames, but something gentler. Something meant just for him. Thank you, the gesture said. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for staying. Thank you for believing we were worth saving. Seojin wrapped his arms around her neck and held on tight. He had not hugged anyone in 8 years. He had forgotten how good it felt. We are not done yet, he thought, knowing she could hear him through the bond. Your brother cannot fly. We need to get off this mountain. The sister pulled back and looked at him. A question in her eyes. Seojin smiled. It was the first real smile he had smiled in longer than he could remember. Can you carry us both? In answer, she spread her wings to their full span, 20 feet from tip to tip. Scales glittering like emeralds. Muscles strong and ready. No longer the broken creature he had found chained in the snow. She was a dragon. And dragons could do anything. The brother climbed onto her back, settling between her shoulders where he could hold on tight. Seojin hesitated. He had never flown before. The idea of leaving the ground, of trusting himself to nothing but wind and wings, terrified him. But he trusted her. That was enough. He climbed up beside the brother, finding a place where he could grip securely. The sister's scales were warm beneath him, pulsing with the fire that had finally returned. She looked back at him, making sure he was settled, then turned to face the open sky. Ready? Seojin took a deep breath. Ready. She launched herself into the air with a single powerful thrust. The ground fell away beneath them. The wind rushed past. The mountain shrank to a white point far below. And Seojin laughed. He could not help it. The joy was too big to contain. After everything, after all the pain and despair and hopelessness, they had made it. They were free. They were alive. They were together. The sister climbed higher, breaking through the clouds into clear blue sky. The sun hit her scales and made them shine like living gems. Her wings beat steadily, carrying them south, away from the cold, toward whatever future awaited them. Seojin had no idea what came next. He had no plans, no goals, no destination in mind. For 8 years, he had walked without purpose. Now he was flying without purpose. The only difference was that he was no longer alone. And somehow, that changed everything. They flew for hours. The world below passed like a painted scroll. Mountains giving way to forests. Forests giving way to rolling hills dotted with villages and farms. The sister flew steadily, her wings never tiring, her fire keeping them all warm despite the cold winds at this height. The brother slept against Seojin's back, exhausted from weeks of starvation, finally able to rest, knowing he was safe. Seojin watched everything with wonder. He had walked through this land for years, seeing it from ground level, knowing it only as roads and paths and distant horizons. From up here, it looked completely different. The patterns of fields made shapes he had never noticed. Rivers gleamed like silver ribbons. Towns that had seemed large from the ground looked like collections of children's toys. This was what dragons saw every day. This vast, beautiful, impossible world spread out below them like a gift. Through the bond, he felt the sister's contentment. She loved flying. It was written into her very being, as fundamental as breathing. The years of being chained, of having her wings pinned and useless, had been a special kind of torture. Now, with the sky open before her, she felt complete again. As the sun began to set, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink, the sister descended. They were approaching human territory now, the outskirts of the eastern provinces. She could not simply land anywhere. Dragons were not welcome in most places. People would panic. Guards would be called. Violence might follow. She found a clearing in a thick forest, far enough from the nearest village to avoid immediate notice, but close enough that Seo-jin could walk there if needed. She landed gently, folding her wings, and waited for her passengers to climb down. Seo-jin's legs wobbled when they touched the ground. His body had not forgotten how to walk, but it seemed confused that walking was necessary when flying was an option. He laughed at himself and stretched, working out the stiffness in his muscles. The brother slid down more gracefully, his young body adapting quickly. He immediately began exploring the clearing, sniffing at trees and bushes, getting his strength back with every step. The forest was full of small animals and birds. For a young dragon, it was a paradise. The sister watched her brother with obvious relief. He was going to be okay. A few weeks of good food and freedom, and he would be healthy again. The thought made her happier than Seo-jin had ever felt her. But now came the hard part. They were in human lands, and humans did not react well to dragons. You should stay hidden. Seo-jin thought through the bond. I will go to the village. Find food. Find information. Figure out our next move. The sister did not like this idea. The bond made her feelings clear. She did not want to be separated from him. Not now. Not ever. The thought of him walking away, even for a few hours, caused her physical distress. Seo-jin understood. He felt the same way. The bond pulled at him, urging him to stay close, to never leave her side. But he had to be practical. 3 beings needed to eat. They needed supplies. They needed a plan that went beyond just surviving the next day. I will come back, he promised. I will always come back. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she lowered her head and pressed her forehead against his chest. The gesture had become their way of saying important things. Things too big for words. Be careful. Humans are dangerous. Seo-jin almost laughed. He was human, but he understood what she meant. Humans in groups, humans with weapons, humans with fear in their hearts. Those humans were very dangerous indeed. I will be careful, he promised. He walked toward the village as the sun disappeared below the horizon. The sister and her brother faded into the forest behind him, their scales blending with the shadows until they were invisible. Even knowing exactly where they were, Seo-jin could barely see them. Good. That would keep them safe. The village was called Cheong-san. It was small, maybe 200 people, built around a central market square with a well and a few shops. Seo-jin had passed through places like this countless times in his wandering years. He knew how they worked, how to present himself, how to be forgettable. He entered the village just as the last light faded. A few people noticed him, a stranger with woolen clothes and a slight limp. But they did not pay much attention. Strangers passed through all the time. As long as he did not cause trouble, no one cared who he was or where he came from. He found the general store and traded the last of his money for rice, dried fish, and vegetables. Not much, but enough for a few days. The shopkeeper was friendly enough, glad for the business. She mentioned that the village had been quiet lately. No trouble, no excitement, just the usual rhythms of rural life. Seo-jin thanked her and left. He was almost at the edge of the village when he heard the commotion. Voices, lots of them, coming from the market square. He should have kept walking, should have minded his own business. But something in the tone of those voices made him stop, made him turn. A crowd had gathered around the village notice board. People were talking over each other, pointing at something posted there. Seo-jin edged closer, curiosity overcoming caution. The notice was an official document, stamped with the seal of the provincial governor. It announced a reward, a large reward, for information leading to the capture of 2 escaped dragons and their human accomplice. Seo-jin felt his blood run cold. The notice described everything. 2 dragons, Jade green, last seen at an abandoned mining camp in the mountains. One larger female, one smaller male. Extremely dangerous. Any person who aided their escape was to be considered a criminal. The punishment for dragon theft was death. Someone had reported them. Someone knew they had escaped, and now the entire province was looking for them. Seo Jin backed away from the crowd slowly. No one was looking at him. No one connected the worn traveler with the wanted criminal. But that could change any moment. All it took was one person who noticed too much. One person who asked the right questions. He had to get back to the forest. Had to warn the sister. Had to figure out what to do next. But as he turned to leave, his eyes met those of a young woman standing at the edge of the crowd. She was looking at him strangely, her head tilted, her expression thoughtful. She had noticed him. She had noticed him paying, too, much attention to the dragon notice. Seojin forced himself to walk normally. Not too fast. Not too slow. Just a tired traveler heading back to wherever he came from. Nothing suspicious. Nothing worth remembering. But he could feel her eyes on his back all the way out of the village. They'd escaped the mountain. But they had not escaped danger. If anything, the danger was just beginning. Seojin ran through the forest in the dark, branches scratching his face, heart pounding against his ribs. They had to leave. Tonight. Right now. Every minute they stayed in this area increased the danger. If that young woman talked, if she reported the suspicious stranger who had stared too long at the dragon notice, guards would come. Hunters would come. And they would not come to talk. He found the sister and brother in the clearing where he had left them. They sensed his fear through the bond before he said a word. The sister was on her feet instantly, wings half spread, fire glowing deep in her throat. Ready for battle. Ready to protect her family. We need to go. Seojin thought urgently. They know about us? There is a reward. The sister absorbed this information calmly. She had expected something like this. Humans always hunted what they feared, what they could not control. It was their nature. Where do we go? She asked through the bond. Her question carried images along with words. Mountains, oceans, distant lands. She did not know the human world the way he did. She did not know which places were safe and which were deadly. Seojin thought quickly. North was out of the question. That was the way they had come, and the search would be concentrated there. East led to larger cities, more guards, more eyes. West was farmland, flat and open, no place to hide. That left south. South was wild country. Thick forests, deep valleys, mountains that most humans avoided because the terrain was too harsh for farming or settlement. Few villages. Few roads. Few reasons for anyone to go there. It was also, according to old stories, dragon territory. Long ago, before the hunting began, dragons had lived in those southern mountains. They had built nests in the high peaks, raised their young far from human interference. Most of them were gone now, driven away or killed. But the land remembered them. And maybe, just maybe, it would welcome them back. South, Seojin decided. We fly south until we find somewhere safe. The sister nodded. She understood. The brother climbed onto her back without being told, ready for another flight. He was stronger now, his young body recovering faster than expected. Another few weeks, and he might be able to fly on his own. Seojin climbed up behind him, settling into the familiar position between the sister's shoulders. Her scales were warm beneath him, pulsing with comfortable heat. The bond hummed between them, strong and steady. She launched into the sky. They flew through the night, using the darkness as cover. The sister navigated by instinct, by senses Seojin could not fully understand. She felt the air currents, read the stars, knew the shape of the land below even when she could not see it. This was what she was born for. This was her true nature. Dawn found them deep in the southern mountains. The landscape had changed dramatically. Dense forests covered everything, broken only by rocky outcrops and rushing rivers. No villages, no roads, no signs of human presence at all. The sister found a cave high on a mountainside, hidden behind a waterfall. It was large enough for all three of them, dry and defensible. Perfect. They landed and explored. The cave went deep into the mountain with multiple chambers and a natural chimney that would disperse smoke from any fires. Seojin could see marks on the walls. Claw marks. Old, faded, but unmistakable. Dragons had lived here before. Long ago. The sister made a sound of recognition. She remembered this place. Not personally, but through stories passed down from her mother, from her mother's mother. This had been a nesting ground once. A sacred place. Before the hunters came. Before everything fell apart. She lay down in the main chamber and sighed. A deep, contented sound. Home. Not exactly, not perfectly, but close enough. A place where they could rest without fear. Seojin explored further. He found a stream nearby with clean water. The forest was full of game. Berries and nuts grew wild. They could survive here. Maybe even thrive. The first few weeks were hard. Seojin had to learn new skills. Hunting without weapons. Building shelter without tools. Living in ways he had never imagined. But he had good teachers. The sister showed him how dragons hunted, how they used fire and speed and patience. The brother, recovering quickly now, became his companion in exploration, helping him find the best spots for gathering food. And slowly, day by day, they built something together. Something that felt dangerously like a life. Seojin started calling them by names. Not their true names, those were sounds humans could not make, but names he chose for them. The sister became Virith, after a legendary hero from his grandmother's stories. The brother became Keller, after a star that had guided travelers since ancient times. They accepted the names without complaint. Through the bond, Seojin sensed that Virith was pleased. She had given him her trust, her fire, centuries of her life. Getting a name in return felt right. A balance. Months passed. Spring came to the mountains, filling the valleys with flowers. Keller grew stronger, his scales darkening to a deep forest green, his wings finally able to carry him through the sky. He took his first solo flight on a clear morning in early summer, circling the mountain with joyful roars while Seojin and Virith watched from the cave entrance. That night, they sat together under the stars. The three of them, human and dragons. Family. Seojin had not thought about his old life in weeks. Had not thought about the burned village, the years of wandering, the loneliness that had driven him to walk into that blizzard. All of that felt distant now, like memories belonging to someone else. He had a home now, a purpose, people who needed him and whom he needed in return. Is this happiness? He thought, not sure who he was asking. Is this what it feels like? Virith pressed against his side. Through the bond, he felt her answer. Yes, this is happiness. And we made it together. Seojin smiled and leaned into her warmth. For the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 5 years passed. The cave in the mountains became something more than shelter. It became a home. Seojin expanded it over time, adding structures that made life more comfortable. A small forge where he practiced his old craft. A storage area for preserved food. A garden on a sun-facing ledge where he grew vegetables that reminded him of his childhood. Keller was fully grown now, as large as his sister, his wings powerful enough to carry him across entire provinces in a single flight. He had inherited their mother's wandering spirit. He spent weeks at a time exploring distant lands, finding places no human had ever seen. But he always came back. Family pulled at him the same way it pulled at all of them. Virith rarely left the mountain. Her centuries were catching up with her. The gift she had given Seojin had cost her more than either of them had realized. She was aging faster than a dragon should. Her fire, though still strong, no longer burned quite as bright. She moved more slowly, slept more deeply, spent long hours simply sitting at the cave entrance, watching the world with ancient eyes. Seojin never mentioned it. Neither did she. But they both knew. The bond between them made hiding impossible. She did not regret her choice. Every time he worried, every time guilt crept into his heart, she pressed her forehead against his chest and reminded him of the truth. She had saved him because he had saved her. She had given him years because those years would have been empty without him. What was a few centuries of life compared to finding someone who truly mattered? The answer was nothing. Nothing at all. On a cool autumn evening, they had a visitor. Seojin was working in his forge when he heard the wings. Not Keller's steady beat. Something different. Heavier. Older. He stepped outside and looked up. A dragon was descending. Massive, silver-scaled, with eyes like frozen lightning. Virith emerged from the cave and stood beside Seojin, her body tense but not aggressive. She knew this dragon. From long ago, the silver dragon landed in the clearing below the cave. He was easily twice Virith's size, ancient and powerful. Scars crossed his scales in countless places. Evidence of battle survived and enemies defeated. His name, Seojin learned through the bond, was something that translated roughly as mountain that breathes. He was the oldest dragon in this part of the world. Perhaps the oldest anywhere. He had come because of rumors. Stories spreading through the dragon community about a human who had saved two of their kind. A human who carried dragon fire in his blood. A human who had bonded with a jade-scale female and lived among them as an equal. Some dragons wanted to kill Seojin. They saw the bond as a corruption, a violation of everything sacred. But Mountain That Breathes was old enough to remember different times. Times when dragons and humans had sometimes worked together. Times before the hunting and the hatred. He wanted to see this human for himself. Seojin stood before the massive dragon without flinching. He had faced death too many times to be frightened by size alone. What mattered was intention. And through the bond with Virith, through the new senses the dragon fire had given him, he could feel this visitor's intention clearly. Curiosity, judgment, but not hostility. Not yet. Mountain That Breathes studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. Virith translated through the bond, turning sounds no human could understand into thoughts Seojin could grasp. God, why did you save them? The question was simple, but heavy. Dragons did not ask idle questions. They demanded truth. Seojin thought about his answer carefully. He could have said many things. That he felt sorry for them. That he could not walk away from suffering. That it was the right thing to do. But those were not the whole truth. And dragons always knew when you were holding back. Because I was dying too, he said finally, speaking aloud even though the ancient dragon could not understand his words. Virith would translate. I was not starving like them, but I was empty inside. I had nothing. No family, no purpose. No reason to keep living except fear of stopping. He paused, remembering that frozen night in the mountains. When I saw them chained and abandoned, I saw myself. And I realized that saving them might save me too. It was selfish, in a way. I helped them because I needed them as much as they needed me. Mountain That Breathes listened, considered. His massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human. Then he made a sound. It took Seojin a moment to realize it was laughter. Deep, rumbling, genuine laughter. Honest, the ancient dragon said through Virith. Completely honest. That is rare in humans. That is rare in anyone. He spread his wings, preparing to leave. But before he did, he looked at Virith one more time. "You chose well," he told her. "Guard this one. They come so rarely." Then he was gone, silver wings carrying him into the evening sky. Virith leaned against Seojin's side. Through the bond, he felt her relief, her pride, her fierce, protective love. They accepted you, she thought. The elders. They accepted you as one of us. Seojin wrapped his arms around her neck. It was awkward. She was far too large for proper hugging. But they had made it work for 5 years. They would make it work for however many more they had. I do not need their acceptance, he thought back. I only need yours. She made that low sound, the one that meant thank you, the one that meant I love you, the one that meant we are family, now and always. Above them, Keller's roar echoed across the mountains. He was returning home, carrying stories of distant lands, ready to share them over a warm fire. Sojin smiled and went to prepare dinner. Once, he had been a lost man walking through a blizzard, looking for a place to die. He had found something else entirely, something he had never expected, something he had never believed he deserved. He had found 2 dragons in chains. He had found a purpose worth living for. He had found a family that chose him just as he had chosen them. And in the end, that made all the difference. Not the dragon fire in his blood. Not the centuries he might now live. Not the impossible bond that tied his soul to Virith's. Just the simple truth that he had stopped walking, finally, and decided to stay. Just the choice to care when caring was hard. To help when helping cost everything. To love when love seemed impossible. That was what saved him. That was what saved all of them. And that was the story they would tell, dragons and humans alike. For generations to come, the man who saw 2 monsters in chains, and saw instead 2 lives worth saving. The human who walked into a storm and walked out a family. Yun Seojin. The one who stayed.